me ask, being we're talking about ECW because that's where people first, saw that you could talk, because you were doing like the interviews and everything. Um, how did that come about? How did Paulie know to contact you? How do you know you were the man for the job?
Well, goes back to the 80s. Um, Paul Heyman came down in the early 80s with a wrestler, just like I went to Texas with the Cuban and tagged along with him and was trying to break into business.
Mhm.
Um, Paul Heyman came down with a wrestler named Tombstone, who you would know. He's out of Baltimore, never really pursued the business and never had a big break, never was on TBS or worked for Vince or anything. A short lifespan in wrestling. He came down with Tombstone and did the loop for the summer. Finally, and I was assistant booker at that time with Bob Roop was the booker, and Fonzie was assistant booker. And Paul Heyman came up to me, and he's been around 4 months, making every show, and riding with his friend Tombstone, trying to break into business, taking pictures, and so on and so on. He said, "Hey, Fonzie, Tombstone's leaving in 2 weeks. He's going back to Baltimore, and you think it'd be possible if I can go to the ring with him and act as his manager? And you're the assistant booker. Could you think you can give me the green light?" And Paul Heyman approached me with a pair of Levi's and a old pair of Converse and a T-shirt, and I said, "Well, you certainly can't go out like that. Do you have money to get a suit or to look appropriate? Like, can't look like the fucking audience." And he says, "Yes." So he went out and bought a suit and came to the ring. I don't know if he had the gimmick phone then or not, but and Tombstone worked with Scott Hall that week, and Scott Hall would end up press slamming um, Paul Heyman every night for the 2 weeks, and then Paul Heyman said, "Fonzie, thank you so much for letting me go for the 2 weeks with him to the ring and all that." And then the next thing I know, years later, he's a big star in AWA, and then TBS and WW and ECW. So I get a phone call. I just left WWF. I was one of the last referees they hired, me and Giant Gonzalez, and the wrestling business was not doing fantastic. They were not selling out everywhere. And Vince approached me and said, "Fonzie, we're going to lay off some talent, but we like you a lot. We're going to use you when we come to Florida. And if business picks back up, you're the first one we're going to hire back as a referee," and so on and so on. And I said, "Okay, thanks, Vince." So I get home and I was off a couple of weeks or something, and my phone rings. It's Paul Heyman. I haven't talked to Paul in a long time. He said, "Hey, Fonzie," and we talked back and forth for a few minutes. He said, "Look, I got this company called ECW." I said, "What the fuck's an ECW?" Because I in Florida Championship Wrestling with every major star from on the planet, then WCW, Ted Turner, and went to Vince and WrestleMania and so on and so on, and never worked an indie show in my life. He said, "Well, this is a company we have in Philadelphia. It's kind of violent, and I got this little program. I'd like to bring you in for 4 weeks, and then we'll do something with you, and then 4 weeks." And I said, "Okay." So I went in. I flew up to Philly. I walk in the dressing room, and I remember I just came from WWF. So I'm wearing a Submariner. I'm fucking beautiful suit. I got nice luggage. I look like $1 million. I walk in the dressing room, ECW, and there is Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, Taz, this guy, that guy. I didn't recognize one fucking person. But little did we know that ECW, Paul was creating its own stars, and everybody became a big name, Sabu, Van Dam, and so on. So my position was Paul wanted me to be anti-ECW, just coming from WWF, where Vince wants the doctor, his wife, 2 kids at ringside. ECW clientele was guys between 19 and 30 years old and 90% male. And So that was our audience, and they were doing all the hardcore stuff, and I was anti-hardcore. You know, a little bit of blood, I'd stop the match. I wanted sports entertainment is what it is, Daddy. No hardcore. So the people hated me for stopping their violence and stuff, and it got over. People wanted to literally kill me, and then for somehow Paul Heyman thought it'd be a good idea to put me with Taz, and Taz had like 4 or 5 different gimmicks and never really got over. You know, he was Tasmania, a monkey boy, or whatever he was, and his gimmick never got over till he became himself, Taz. They stuck us together, and then I was with him for about a year, and he didn't need me because he could cut good promos and so on. So they thought it'd be great to put me with Sabu. Sabu didn't talk, and you know, it just worked out. I ended up staying there 5 years.
I like
So I
the
was
angle
supposed
that you actually bet against Taz because you thought Sabu. It was a genius. Whoever came up with that, that was a great
that
turn for everybody involved.
Paul Heyman, what a brilliant mind.